You want to wait for the camera?
Yes.
Okay, I got 7 seconds for the bars. Okay, we're on. We're rolling. We're all set.
The reason that I say that is that I turned up amazing footage of like Frank on a camel opening the dunes with Joey Lewis, you know, and the guy looks like he's having the best time in the world. And I said to Sonny King, I said, how come he looks so stiff on all those television shows and everything, but in this like newsreel footage, he looks like he's having a blast. And Sonny said, well, you have to remember he always looked happy when he wasn't married or involved with somebody. That was when he was the happiest. Women were his downfall.
You want to know something? I believe that part. I believe Frank was the happiest when he was single. I really do. I find that people stiffen up when you're out of your element in reference to going to do a television show. When you're off your own stage, and you're off your own dialogue, and you know what you're going to say just about, and you know what song is going to follow which song, and you've been doing it for months on end, although you keep changing your shows, you know. When you walk out to do someone else's television show, and they've got dialogue, and you're supposed to read it, if you're going to do a skit or whatever, or if you're not going to do a skit, you're still in somebody else's ballpark. And I think that could make you stiffen up a little bit. The best person that I ever worked with that could just completely relax you, because I was never used to talking, and for me to do a skit on television was a little difficult for me. Give me a song, let me stand up and sing, and I'm okay. But Dinah Shore, when Louie and I divorced, Dinah Shore was the first one that got me to come out of the house, because I was petrified to come out by myself. And she had me do her show, and she was so wonderful that I completely relaxed on it, even though for the first time I was by myself. I didn't have Louie, you know. And very few people can give you that kind of relaxation. Very few people that it is their own show will want to give you that relaxation. It's their show, and they run it with an iron fist. Instead of saying, golly, I've got this one and this one and this one this week, what can I do to make them better, to make my show better? Not many people think that way.
You look real relaxed with Dean.
Oh, I was very relaxed with Dean, yeah. And I did Dean's show a lot of times, and I found out later why. I always thought it was because I was so adorable. But Greg Garrison, Dean's producer, told me it was because Dean and I sang in the same key. Anyhow, I loved Dean. I really did. He was wonderful to work with. And of course, Frank's show. I only did one of Frank's shows. I was a nervous wreck. And I'm standing up there, and I had on a strapless gown, and I did a number with Frank. He walks up to me in one of the scenes, and he grabs my shoulders with his hands, and he says, hey, baby, something. I don't remember what the line was. His hands were ice cold. And when I realized he was just as nervous as I wasn't nervous anymore. It just went away. So big stars get nervous too, you know.
He looks nervous on television. He looks like, what are they going to do to me now? You know, you can feel the apprehension. That's why the 2 hours of shows at the Sands in January of 1960, I've never ever seen him look as happy. He's laughing. It's like somebody's going to do something, somebody's going to do something else. He's just up there having a good time. And I think that's the beauty of those shows, that they're liberating. I mean, it's everybody's there.
Yeah. I think if you go out on the stage and you know your songs, number one, you know kind of what kind of order they're supposed to go in. But let's face it, if you don't do a song in the same order that your lineup calls for, who cares? I mean, who's going to shoot you, you know? And that's my attitude on stage. I walk out there knowing what I'm supposed to do, knowing basically what I'm supposed to say, although I never have anything written as to what to say. But I figure if I hit a bad note, they're not going to kill me. You know, somebody may say the next day, oh, God, she was wonderful, but do you remember that one note she hit bad? And I thought, what can I do? If I faint on stage, somebody's going to help me? So I don't worry about it anymore. I used to get extremely nervous. I used to have 2 shots of vodka to walk on stage.
Were you aware of the fact that there were people, entertainers, who rarely left Vegas. I mean, Joey Lewis lived in Vegas, right? He lived the Vegas life. Was there a difference between the performers that became Vegas residents and played Vegas, and the people like you and Louis you'd go off to your farm and then you'd come back? I mean, what kind of people settled there?
I was not aware that Joey Lewis lived there.
Well, I've got lots of footage of him in front of some house that he seemed
Oh, that's
to
the bungalows at the El Rancho.
Oh,
Those
so
are
he
the
wasn't
bungalows.
living there.
No, he didn't live there. In those days, nobody lived there. Louis and I did, but we also had our home back in Louisiana.
Right.
But we actually lived there. The Mary Kay Trio, who was very big in those days, they lived there.
Right.
And they were originally from Hawaii.
Right.
The act started moving in. Louis and I moved there in 54, and then we finally got a house in 55. And then I would say, well, Joe Williams now lives there. There was a big prize fighter that lived there. There's a lot of stars that live there
did
now.
you go out every night? I mean, did you go to clubbing? Like, if you weren't performing, did you drop around and see everybody?
No.
You didn't.
No, Louis played golf, and I stayed home with the kids. No, we did not.
Right.
Louis was not a clubber or a goer. He was not a follower. Louis was a leader. And because of this, a lot of things that I would do with my brother. Dean, for years, thought my brother was my boyfriend. And when Louis and I finally divorced, he told me, he said, okay, he said, now you can stop telling people this is your brother. I said, but Dean, this is my brother, you know.
But the like when they made the contract with Frank for the Sands, then they built that whole thing for him, right? They built his suite, a wall, a pool, a steam room. You know, when they gave him 9% of the Sands.
Well, the steam room was already there.
Uh-huh.
No, they didn't build him a steam room. They put a wall around the suite. No, they didn't build any particular suite.
See, because I read they built him a whole apartment or something at the Sands, and they built it on the ground floor because he didn't like heights. He was afraid to go up. He didn't want to stay up in the hotel. Is that true?
In those days, we didn't have up. Everything was ground. No, the only one that I know that had a suite really built for him was Sammy. And Caesar's Palace built him the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen. It was out of a movie set with two huge stairways going up either side of the living room. I mean, the living room was almost as big as this room. Not quite. It was unbelievable. And that's the only time that I know. I know they've remodeled things, like in Atlantic City Resorts remodeled a suite for Frank, put in a kitchen for him, things like that.
Do you think, is it true that a lot of people have written about Frank having a percentage of the Sands and then later having a percentage of Cal Neva? Somebody said to me that it was only great business to give him 9% of the Sands because nobody could bring the gamblers into Vegas like Sinatra, and they didn't want him going to another hotel. They wanted to make it so attractive. And that was really the reason that they gave him 9% of the Sands. Do you know much about that? Like other entertainers, Dean, I think, got 3%, but they were the only two people that ever got a percentage of the hotel.
That's true, and mainly is because they couldn't pay them the salaries. Okay? Frank brought in gamblers, Dean brought gamblers, Sammy brought gamblers, Louis and I brought gamblers, Joey Lewis brought gamblers. Patty Page, Red Skelton, Sophie Tucker brought gamblers too. Patty Page, Red Skelton, I'm going to give you some really good acts, big acts in those days, and they did not bring gamblers. Some of your biggest acts in the country in those days didn't. So I would say, yes, they would not want to lose Frank Sinatra. Now,
and that was the name of the game, right? The object was to bring the gamblers.
Oh, sure. Sure, because the rooms couldn't pay for themselves. Now, like today in Vegas, they want the showroom to pay for itself. They want the lounge to pay for itself. It's impossible. You've got to bring in acts that will bring in gamblers. That's what's going to pay for everything. Because to get a decent lounge act in Vegas today, you've got to pay close to $20,000. These the hotels don't want to pay it. They want to pay $7,000, $7,500, and for that you're going to get a complete unknown that nobody knows, and they're not going to bring in gamblers.
Right, and that was the name of the
Sonny
game.
King, by the way, Jimmy Durante brought in gamblers. Yeah, Freddie Bell is a lounge act. He brings gamblers.
Do you remember seeing Peter Lawford performing with Jimmy Durante?
Yes.
What was that act like?
Yeah, that was at the Desert Inn. Well, I adore Peter. But Peter was just such a nice man, such a class. He's a class act. He really is. And I loved Jimmy Durante. Jimmy Durante is my second favorite person in show business. My first is Nat King Cole. He was the best, bar none. But Jimmy and Peter got along wonderful, and Jimmy really loved him. And Peter was good on stage. He was adorable. He could sing a little bit. He could dance a little bit. And he knew a lot of interesting stories he could tell. He was interesting on stage. I'd go see him again, you know.
Well, you know, back in the 40s when he and Frank were at MGM, he was really the leading man. I mean, he had all that style. He looked great with the tennis racket, you know.
Right,
But people
yeah.
have told me that he was a very sad person, that he got overpowered very easily by people.
Peter?
Yeah.
I never knew him to be sad at all. He was a very happy person. He and Pat, they were wonderful together. You know, no one can ever say what causes a breakup of a marriage, but they were wonderful together. I never saw a sad side of Peter, no. I would say he could get overpowered by Frank Sinatra, yes. But not by Sammy or not by Dean unless he wanted to.
But many people say that when Frank cut him off and, you know, blamed him for Kennedy not coming to the place in Palm Springs, that Peter Lawford never really came back from that it was like a 1-2 punch. Frank cut him off, and then Kennedy got assassinated, and his whole world, you know, because his world was so invested in them.
Yes. I only saw Peter a couple of times after all that happened, and he was devastated by it, and he had some very rough times after that. And I have not read the book that his wife wrote, so I don't know what they say. I just know he went through some really bad times.
Well, James Spader wrote in The Man Who Kept the Secrets that he was just always, unfortunately, in the wrong place at the wrong time. And many people have told me that it was so unfair for Frank to think that Peter Lawford could control the Kennedys or make them come down to Palm Springs. But he blamed him. You know?
Well, you always have to have somebody to blame, and it was poor Peter in that respect. But I don't know. I think maybe through the years Frank might have realized it wasn't Peter, because Peter adored Frank. He would have done anything in the world for him. And I don't think Frank was dumb enough to think that Peter could control the Kennedys where he stayed.
Right.
You know.
Right. But he sure got rid of them fast.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And I've always felt that there might have been something else that nobody knew about.
Right. That would have explained that. All right. Tell me, do you have any funny stories of gamblers or incidents that happened that you were witness to in hotels in Vegas in the 50s?
Well, when I was pregnant, I used to shoot dice a lot for men that came in because they always felt a pregnant woman was lucky with dice. And I was a lucky shooter, but I never gambled. I would put $1 on the hardways, and they'd want to give me money, and I'd never take any money from them. Louis didn't gamble in those days. Towards the end of our marriage, he did. But I saw people, Vince Edwards came in one night he was gambling, and he wanted some money, and I wouldn't help him get it from the cashier. And he was furious with me because I wouldn't. And I told him, I said, how much have you lost? And he told me, I said, no. I said, I'm not going to help you. I'm sorry. He said, all you've got to do is tell this man. I said, I know that. And this is in front of the cashier's cage. I said, I know that, Vince, but I'm not going to do it. I'm sorry. You can be mad at me. And he was furious with me for a long time. And then he got over it. But I had seen people come in there that had gorgeous homes. One man was a florist in Beverly Hills. Lost his business, lost his home, his cars, his wife, his family, all from gambling. So I never really went around the tables.
Well, look at Shecky.
Oh, poor Shecky, I know.
Were any of the guys, were Frank or Dean or Sammy, were any of them gamblers, or did they pretty much just kind of like do it for show?
Not to my knowledge. Dean used to go out and get behind the blackjack tables and deal blackjack. Jerry did too sometimes. I never saw Sammy do that, and I think Frank might have done it once or twice, but no, I don't know them to be heavy gamblers. There was an incident once with Frank over at Caesars over gambling, but I've never known him to be a big gambler.
Right. Do you remember what was going on with Frank when he kind of got himself fouled up in '63 when he lost Cal Neva, and they came back in to, investigate him again, and all of those. It was almost like a resurgence of a lot of the problems that he had in the early '50s, where he just kind of lost control of things
We
for a
need to
while.
touch Keely if she's.
Okay, great. We went back and pulled all the New York newspaper accounts. Do you know that Spellman, Cardinal Spellman, actually went to the COPA to call him out, and it was terrible. It was a national disgrace that he was getting a divorce. People forget.
And then
what that was like
and then
in
look
those
what the
days.
church did later on.
Exactly.
They let him go, almost denounce his children,
That's
get an
right.
annulment, and be married at the altar. Come
That's
on.
right. That's right. But in
Can't talk
those,
about the Catholic Church either.
but in those days,
They don't come off too well in the book.
No wonder Martin Luther got so pissed.
But in those days, I don't think people understand how your career was so tied in with your personal life.
But it still is today
I
with
don't
everybody.
think anywhere near like it used to be.
Oh God, today I think it's worse for these young
Really?
kids. Oh yeah, I do.
Well, it had to be
You know,
awful.
You've got to realize that people like me, especially, but maybe not Dean or if he was alive or Frank, we're getting older. And if you don't have a hit record, who are you? I'm living proof sitting here that I've been working, my career has been spanning 1961, what is this, 98, all those years without a hit record. And a lot of people don't know who I am, the younger generation. Thank God some of the younger generation do know. And the older people that know who I am, some of them are dying off. So I've got to get a hit record or a book or something going out there. I think that it's wonderful that because you're quote unquote supposedly a good singer, that you can still go on stage and earn a living and have some nice prestige going for you. It's easier with a hit record. Somebody asked me one time, what do you miss most about not being like number one in the world like Lou and I were? I said, I think I miss the first class treatment. I said, I can't wait till I can fly first class again. Well, I finally reached to where I fly first class again without a hit record. But I believe that I'll get one. But I also think that these kids today, getting back to them, their personal lives are wide open to everybody. They have no privacy. The movie stars today have no privacy. In the old days, they were guarded. Their privacy was not invaded. And when you found out something about a big star in the old days, it's because you had to have an in somewhere. Nowadays, everything is wide open. These kids have to have 8-foot fences around their home with electronic devices and guards. That's terrible. And I feel for them. Their fame has cost them an awful lot.
Yeah, that's true. Jeannie Fideli said that when Sinatra and Dean and all of them would come to Atlantic City, they'd walk around, they'd go out and
sure.
eat. They didn't have to have an armored car.
That's right. No.
They could move among people, and nobody would even think of assaulting them.
That's right. That's right. But today, people are crazy when it comes to assaulting. If they would just be normal today and walk up to an act, regardless if it's the young kids of today or one of the older ones, and just say, I enjoyed your show, or may I please have your autograph, it would be different. But nowadays, you don't know. Like in Atlantic City, you can't walk down the boardwalk by yourself anymore. My daughter and I were there a few years ago. I was working there, and we didn't dare wear a piece of jewelry going on the boardwalk. And we'd walk arm in arm.
Let me ask you, taking you back to the Kennedy pre-inaugural gala, do you remember the snow? Remember
Oh,
the
God,
snow?
yes.
Can you tell me?
Oh, yeah. It was a really blessed. It's funny, not too many people know this, but Louie and I weren't talking in those days. And Louie and the boys went ahead of me, and I was someplace else. And when I flew in the day of rehearsal, I walked on the stage, and Frank said to me, where the hell have you been? I said, don't yell at me. And he said, where have you been? I said, Frank, it doesn't matter where I've been. The fact is I'm here. This is what time rehearsal is called for, and I'm here, right? So now we all go up to our suites, and I mean, it was so cold. The snow was up to your knees, and Louis is up in the suite, and we naturally, we were still married, we shared the same suite, and we were talking about going to what gown I was going to wear, and we had brought several, and how I had come from New York, and Louis wanted to know how everything was in New York, and then we went down to do rehearsal, and then eventually, well, we were there like 3 days or so before the show, and Frank would have everybody gather in his suite at night, but you were allowed to wear your robes. You could just, after dinner, go to your room, change your clothes, put on your robe, and go in the suite. And he was with, what's her name in those days? Juliet Prowse, who really, and I liked Juliet. I didn't know her really well, but she didn't fit in at all with his people. I don't think she really liked any of them, to tell you the truth. But there was a big difference in her over here and this one over here, let's say, even Janet and Tony. It's a big difference in those three people. And we all wanted to go out. You couldn't get out of the hotel. That's how bad the snow was. So it was wonderful, though. I remember Ella Fitzgerald signed a picture for me in those days, and I was so thrilled. I just love Ella Fitzgerald. She was my idol when I was growing up. I used to listen to her and June Christie, and those are the only two I listened to. So when I finally got to meet her and she signed an autographed picture, she signed my program, I was just thrilled. I met some nice people from that, but in those days I didn't talk to anybody. And I was really very shy.
So when you'd go to Frank's suite, what was everybody doing? Just eating?
Eating, yeah. It would be late at night, and they'd bring up, just tidbits, hors d'oeuvres, things like that, and just sit around and really talk about what happened that day. Because like I said, you couldn't get out of the hotel because of the snow. And then Frank asked Louis and I if we wanted to go to the swearing in of Jack, and I looked at Louis. I didn't know what he was going to answer him because Louis never went to anything. And Louis said to me, well, babe, what do you think? I said, no. I said, I would love to see Jack sworn in. I said, but I cannot go stand in that cold. It was so cold, Carole. There we go. But it was so cold that I didn't want to go, and so we didn't go to it.
But in terms of that gala, Frank was really in charge of the whole thing. He planned it.
Absolutely.
There wasn't, because people said, well, Peter Lawford produced it.
Oh, no. No, Frank Sinatra from day one, when I think Jack himself called and asked him to do it. And from day one, Frank had complete control of that whole show. And he was there at every rehearsal. I don't care which act was rehearsing. He was there the entire time that they had anything to do with the show. The lighting, the sound, the orchestra, everything. Frank was there. No, that was Frank's baby. It really was.
Were you ever privy to, Sonny King told me he was sitting at ringside one night when the Rat Pack was on, and that the thing that Sinatra hated most were those shoes that Peter Lawford wore with the English crests. And he'd say, take those fucking shoes off. You've made all your money in this country. How dare you come on a stage with me and wear shoes with English crests? Do you ever remember any of that kind of banter between them?
No, and you want to know why? Frank wore them. Frank wore the same shoes. As a matter of fact, Dean would not wear them, but Frank did wear them. So I think Sammy wore them at one point.
That's so weird. Those velvet shoes with
Yes,
English
of
crests?
course, yes.
It
became a fad. It became an in thing.
Did they all have to wear like certain cufflinks, did they all work out their outfits an awful lot?
Not at all. No, they wore whatever they wanted to wear.
Right. So it wasn't like, you were like one of the few women working in Vegas at that time. What was that like? Was it lonely to not have...
Lonely?
Well, you didn't have other women. It wasn't like there were a million other women.
I don't like women. I hate to tell you that. No, let me rephrase that. It's not that I dislike women. I don't trust women. I found them to cause and create more problems than anybody else in my lifetime. in my little world of my own, okay? My friends to this day are all male friends. I have maybe 2 women friends. My mother was like that, though, and I should go back a step. My mother never had coffee with a next-door neighbor. She never went to the movies with a girlfriend. She never went to lunch with a girlfriend. My mother was a very family person, and I grew up being that way. I found out later, as things developed and people would lie and create problems for you, that most of these were done by women. So maybe also because I was very open and honest and said what I felt and what I thought, when I did finally talk to somebody, that I would get into trouble because they would repeat maybe what I said to somebody that I might not have said something nice about. I don't know.
Do you think it had to do with the fact that women were very competitive with each other for certain men?
It didn't matter to me. It wasn't in my world. See, my world was my little world, and it consisted of Louis, the group to a point, my 2 daughters, and naturally my mother and my 3 brothers. And that was it. That was my world, and I was very happy with that world. I didn't need Frank Sinatra. I didn't need Sammy, who I'm thrilled that I became friends with them. But I didn't need very much. I was happy. I had my kids in the daytime. I went to work at night because we worked from midnight till 6 in the morning. And Louis would play golf in the day. French singer.
Certainly not compared to the men.
End
I
of
mean,
tape.
sure they had
Stop
marvelous
trans-